Holly, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Victoria. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, that makes two of us. Honestly, I'm honored and I cannot wait to hear your wisdom. But first, 10 rapid fire questions. So are you ready?
I am. I'm nervous, but I'm ready. Let's do it.
Amazing. Okay, number one, what's the favorite thing about where you live?
Ooh, okay. This is interesting because I just moved.
Mhm.
And I would say okay, so geographically, I live in the Hudson River Valley of New York State. And so I would say the favorite thing about that is the mountains. There's just beautiful mountains everywhere, but about where I moved specifically, it's the convenience factor. So I used to live in a place that was like I had no sidewalks, I had no ability to just like get outside very easily. And this place I can just like walk out my door and go for a beautiful walk, and it's been life changing.
Oh, that's
Not quite
funny.
rapid fire, but
Oh, when I say rapid fire, some of these questions, they're not really a rapid answer, so it's all good. Number two, this is rapid. Coffee or tea or neither?
coffee.
I hate coffee. I'm so sorry to say.
Wait, you're from England, so that makes a lot of sense that you would prefer
It's
tea.
tea.
Yes.
All about the tea. Number three, sweet or savory?
Savory. Hands
Savory
down. But
girl.
then if I can do a sweet and savory combo, like that is also a preferred option
Mm,
for me. But if you're going to give me one or two options, if it's a binary, savory.
I'm down with the combo, sweet and savory, hot and cold, spicy and sweet.
Yes, yes,
Love
yes. I
it.
love that.
Number four, the favorite way to move your body.
Ooh, okay. So there's a couple different ways, but like that would probably tie with each other. One is always going to be walks in nature. That's something that I do every single day. But
Mhm.
I also do love to get my heart rate up. So any sort of like workout that includes affirmations and spirituality with increasing your heart rate. So I love the class by Taryn Toomey. That's one of my favorite.
What's that? I've not heard of that. Tell me more.
So her name is Taryn Toomey, and she runs a class called The Class, and it's based in the U.S. I'm sure, but you can she also streams all of her classes online as well. And it I would say it's high intensity interval training meets Kundalini yoga meets spirituality and affirmations and yoga. It's all of that combined, and it's a really powerful intensive cardio workout while also being so like embodied. And I always finish that workout feeling like so connected to myself and spirit at the same time.
Wow, that sounds incredible. I'll definitely check that out because the beauty of online, you can do it anywhere, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I'm a home workout person. I don't do gyms. It just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, me too. I'm lucky I go upstairs. I have a little gym up there, but it's just so convenient. And you're also more likely to go because you literally have to walk upstairs. That's
Yes,
it.
exactly.
Yeah. All right. I'm excited to hear your answer to this one, Holly. If you have one, what is your spirit animal?
Ooh, okay. Um, I'm not sure exactly that I have a spirit animal. I would say that I have animals that visit me very often, and that would be the hawk. So hawks are constantly visiting me, and they're always a reminder for me. I see them in when I'm having moments of fear and distrust.
Mm.
I will have a hawk visitor. I had one yesterday because fear and distrust are part of the human experience, and we might weave in and out of them throughout our days. And yeah, they visit me often.
That's beautiful. I love that. Okay, number six. This is going to be quite a funny one, I'm guessing. What is the most ridiculous diet or almost ridiculous way of eating you've ever done or followed?
Love this question. Okay. So, um, as most people, I was never like a really good dieter by any means, like because right, diets fail 95% or 98% of the time. So there was one diet that I stuck to, which I'm sure we'll talk about when we get into my story a little bit more. That was very disordered, led to orthorexia. Doesn't have a specific name, but the most ridiculous thing I did was actually when I was in college with my mom. There was a diet called, and I also have an evangelical Christian upbringing as well, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Oh, yeah.
There's something called the Master Cleanse, which was supposed to be like kind of mimicking Jesus's 40 days and 40 nights without food or water.
Wow.
And you're supposed to, it's like one of those lemon water, cayenne maple syrup diet things that you're supposed to do for like, I mean, I know people who did it for 40 days, which is to me wild. But my mom and I tried to do it and we lasted maybe 12 hours before we're like, we're hungry. Let's go make dinner.
That's epic. So funny.
Shortest and most ridiculous diet ever.
That's funny. All right, what's the next one? Oh yeah, this is probably not so rapid fire, but I'm going to go with it anyway. What if you was a magician and you could solve one world problem? What problem would you choose to solve?
Wow. Wow. Okay, there's so many.
Yeah. Just one.
Because like initially I want to go to like, hunger and poverty, because all of those are obviously really, really important to me. But I'm thinking in terms of like what we're experiencing collectively right now, I think that a major world problem that we're experiencing is the inability, our sense of tribalism, which is so built into our human evolution, but like the inability to be with people who are different than us and causing disconnection through difference, essentially. I would like the problem that I would like to solve is that difference does not equal disconnection, and it doesn't have to be us versus them all the time, that there are infinite ways of seeing the world and that we can have respect for and honor each other in our differences.
Oh yes, I love that vision. Like world peace.
Yeah. Yes. I guess that would be the word for it.
Yeah, I love that. All right, number 8. Have you got, and I know this might be really hard to answer, a favorite quote or mantra that you live by?
I'm trying to think of the ones that I've, okay. So recently, I would say what's felt most comforting to me, because I think there's been different ones for different seasons of my life, is, and I don't know if there's somebody who actually said this or not, but it's, this is happening for me versus this is happening to me. So it's always, this is happening for my highest good versus I'm a victim of my circumstances. This is happening to me.
So empowering. Yeah. Okay, number 9. What book do you think everyone should read? So not your favorite specific. I know these are quite hard.
Yes, I love them though. It's forcing me to think.
What book should everyone read, do you think?
Ooh. My gosh, I'm looking at my bookshelf right now. Okay. So, what book should everyone read? I mean, feel free to cut out this silence, but the one that's coming to mind right now is The Universal Christ by Richard Rohr. So again, I'm sure we'll get more into spirituality as we're talking, but Richard Rohr is a Franciscan monk who is, his roots are, I can't even go into describing who he is, but the path that he's followed, it's really about bringing oneness and non-dual consciousness into religion, essentially, whether that's Christianity or Buddhism or Hinduism or whatever it is. It's about, again, I'm clearly very passionate about moving beyond our differences, and Universal Christ is about the Christ energy that exists within all of us, within every religion, across our differences, and kind of calling us all back into unity consciousness. And that book was hugely healing for me in my own spiritual trauma, but also and how I see the world, and how I believe if people were to actually embody this, how we would actually see each other and interact with each other with love and kindness.
I will ask you to send me that so I can get it for myself, and I'll also link it below if anyone wants to read that. Thank you for sharing. Have you read, because I can't go to the next question without asking this, because this was a profound book for me, Conversations with God by Neale Donald Walsch?
I have not read Conversations with God. I've heard of it. And yeah, I mean, if you recommend it, I would absolutely add it to my list as well.
Yeah. Because I was skeptical at first because I'm not religious, but I mean, I used to decide the word God meant religion because of all the patriarchy around that word, right? I'm sure we're going to go into this. So I was a bit like, but I still felt called to read it. And oh my gosh, it's not religious at all. It's the author's channeling. He's asking questions, the powerful questions like, if there's a God, why do 4-year-olds die of cancer? If there's a God, like all the questions that anyone could have ever asked, there's the answer. And it's just like so comforting to read.
Yes. Oh, I would love to check that out.
Yeah, I'll send it to you as well so you can remember what it was called.
Please.
All right. Okay. Last one, bit of a strange one, but last one. These are from those 2 strange questions, the one I'm about to read and the other one. I treated myself to like this 3-card pack, and there's a self, a life, and environment, and then you pick a card each day. It's not spiritual cards, but they ask you like a really thought-provoking question. And so I picked 2 for this. So this is one of the other ones. So what if you had just completed a 10-year prison sentence? How would you spend your first free day?
Ooh, wow. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind would be to like not leave my husband's side. Like that's the thing that like comes up for me initially, is like just cuddle with him on the couch for as like long as I possibly can. And then probably some version of like rolling in the grass and being in nature.
Like sound of music, like I'm free.
Yes, exactly. Just feeling the expansiveness of being outside of like such a confined space. So that it would be like just touch, like loving touch and nature.
I love that. And bonus question 11. I'm so grateful that you are here, but why did you say yes to sharing your message today on this podcast?
Ooh, oh gosh, Victoria, you're going deep like right away, and I love it. Why did I say yes? So to me, and again, this is kind of going to go back to something that clearly is on my mind and it's something that I'm thinking about a lot. To me, conversation is so incredibly healing. When I've had some of the most profound moments of transformation, of like having my, I guess you could say, like the like my beliefs kind of like shattered through being witness to conversation. And many of those happening in podcast format, where 2 people or 3 people are coming together and kind of, if they're willing to do so, taking off the masks and sharing authentically of themselves, their own journeys and stories, in hopes that it heals, empowers, transforms, calls in even just one other person. And that's why I love the medium of podcasting so much, and why I've been on 30 plus podcasts at this point, because I just love it so much. And I also, when you and I connected, felt a very sisterhood connection to you, even though we've never been in the physical presence of each other before. And we've spent maybe, an hour and a half, 2 hours together virtually. I felt a comfort level with you that let me know we could have that type of conversation, go beyond surface level into the depths.
Yes, thank you so much. And I received that, and I also feel the same. This is one of the best things about this type of work that we do, connecting with like-minded sisters, and then it's just like it touches your heart straight away, and there's just no better feeling.
Yes. I know listeners don't know this, but we recorded an episode yesterday together for my podcast, and I left that episode feeling like so uplifted and so like, oh my gosh, like I am so grateful. Like, how awesome is it that we get to do this, right? How awesome is it that we get to take these conversations and put it into this like thing? I don't even know how it works.
I know.
It does it for me. And then it just like goes out to all these people and they get to hear it and be transformed by it. Like, oh my God, that is so amazing.
It's amazing. And I would love, and I know that you don't wear a mask, so there's no need for you to take the mask off, but I would love for you to, how have you became the woman that you are today? Tell us your story. I cannot wait to hear this all.
Yeah. Okay. So, rein me back in if I go too
Okay.
far onto the heroine's journey. I've mentioned spirituality, obviously, many, many times just from those rapid fire questions. So it's a big part of my origin story. So as I mentioned, I grew up in the evangelical church here in the US. And for anyone who doesn't know about Western Christianity or evangelical Christianity, the very basis of this was created by Augustine, who's one of the, fathers of St. Augustine, one of the fathers of founding fathers, I guess you could say, of Christianity, Western Christianity specifically, is rooted in this idea of original sin, meaning I was born bad. We were born bad as a human species, and our job is to be in this cycle of constantly trying to redeem ourselves and earn the love of God.
Wow.
And at the same time, you're also taught that God's love is unconditional, but that if you fall off the path,
Mm.
you'll be spit from God's mouth. Like these are these very conflicting, contradictory messages that you're constantly hearing. And so that was my understanding of myself from, gosh, probably the age of 4 or 5, that there was a man named Jesus who needed to die for me because I was so sinful. I was so bad. I was so unworthy. He needed to die for me in order for me to have eternal life. And my job is to kind of repay that debt in a way. That's what I meant to do. And so that theme really influenced, for me, in my experience, my good girl programming, which I know we will get more into what exactly I mean by good girl programming. You don't have to have a religious upbringing in order to be impacted by good girl programming. On top of that, we as women just, I don't, whether this is nurture or nature, I'm not actually sure. We tend to just be more agreeable, right? From like a psychological perspective, we tend to be more agreeable. We tend to not want to rock the boat. We tend not to want to, be different in any way and really be seen as good, right? And so that was sort of the mission of my life, was to be seen as good. And good meant in my behavior, in my speech, in how people perceived me, and especially as it related to my body, right? And then body encompassing everything from my sexuality to how I look, to my weight, my size, all of that. And so that manifested itself from a very young age in disordered eating. I went on a diet when I was 8 years old. It was the first time I remember, and not that there was a name for that diet specifically, but like consciously trying to restrict myself from that age. That followed me all the way up through my high school years. And I had a very disordered relationship with food in high school, where I wouldn't eat all day because I was actually embarrassed of eating. Like, I don't know if you can relate to this or anyone else who's listening can, but like there was something about being in like this high school cafeteria and like needing to eat. Like I was almost embarrassed by my own need, right? To actually eat food and to feel like, oh my God, are people watching me? Like this is embarrassing. Like there was shame around my need. And so then I would go home and binge, right? That would be my strategy every single day. And no wonder I had digestive issues and all of those types of things. That followed me into my college years. I moved to New York City when I was 18 years old. So I left my hometown in Western New York, moved to New York City to pursue a career in the fashion industry. So very image centric industry. Not surprising that I chose that at all. And that's when I actually started to have skin issues. So I had like perfect, clear, no acne from, most of my adolescence, youth, teenage years. And then when I moved to New York City, my skin started to break out, and I struggled with female adult acne from probably the age of 18 through, interestingly, 2020. Like, so for about 12 years, I struggled with female adult acne, and it felt like I was wearing like my body image issues, like right on my face, right? Like everyone could see them. And I just felt so ashamed. And I went through periods of time where I was on like strong antibiotics in order to clear up my skin. It worked, but totally destroyed my body in the meantime, until I was about 27 years old. And at that point, I had sort of deconstructed, I guess. I don't really love that word. I had left and moved away from the religion of my youth. Like it's just something that wasn't resonating anymore. And a big part of this is kind of like a side tangent, a big part of evangelical Christianity, especially during the time that I grew up in was something called purity culture, which encouraged young people to wait till marriage to have sex. And it was something I just couldn't do. Like I am like a sexual being, as like many of us can relate to. And I was like, I can either have my spirituality or I can have sex. And I chose sex, like if I'm just totally honest. And so I like left my religion because of that. Like I left that like sort of like that spirituality behind, because I didn't feel like I could have connection to spirit and be sexual at the same time. And so I disconnected from spirituality for quite some time. Was with my husband, my boyfriend then, now husband. And when we decided to get married when I was around 27 years old, I decided after we got married that I wanted to take a more holistic approach to healing my skin, because I was still struggling with it. I wanted clear skin for my wedding day, so I stayed on the antibiotics. And then after that, I went off of them. And I started working with a naturopathic doctor and acupuncturist, which can be a beautiful thing. I still love acupuncture. I still love natural remedies. Yet this unlicensed, but she wasn't unlicensed, not an unlicensed acupuncturist, but someone who had no business giving nutritional advice, let's just say, put me on a very extreme elimination diet overnight. So cut out all of the anti-inflammatory, quote unquote, anti-inflammatory stuff. And it was supposed to be 6 weeks. It was supposed to be an experiment that lasted like 6 weeks. And like interesting parallel here is that like, so that, well, let me fast forward a little bit. So that experience that was supposed to be 6 weeks turned into a year and a half. There was no guidance to go off of this highly restrictive diet. And I see this strong parallel between me sort of rejecting purity culture in my religion to then embodying it in my relationship with food, right? So like, it was like, I couldn't uphold purity in my sexuality. Oh, but boy, was I going to do it in my relationship to food. So I was that person who was like, you know, taking pictures of my food and hashtagging pure foods movement and like never letting one chemical pass my lips. And like, I was highly perfectionistic, highly puritanical in how I was eating. Yet interestingly enough, my skin wasn't clearing. It didn't help my skin in the slightest. But what did happen was that I lost a lot of weight. I wasn't eating these certain foods that had previously been a part of my diet, and I lost a lot of weight and got to get all of the affirmation and all of the confirmation that I had done the good thing as a woman in our society. Like, oh, you look so good now that you've lost the weight. Oh, you're so disciplined. Oh, you're so like, you're just on it. Like, I want to be more like you. And I was like, yes, give me more of that. Give me more of that affirmation. And so I started my health coaching business based on that, based on wanting to help women lose weight through these like highly restrictive diets, but kind of like guising it in like love. It's love for your body to do these things. But mind you, underneath the surface, like I was constantly stressed and anxious around food. I was socially isolating. I had digestive issues. My hair was falling out. Like I was having all of these adverse effects. And then long story short, I came across the book Intuitive Eating by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Reich. And I saw myself in this book so clearly. Like I came across that book because I think there was something, I was coming back to my spirituality, and there was something that was like spiritual about it to me. Like, oh, eating intuitively, listening to your intuition. If I read this book, then I'm going to only want to eat like fruit and vegetables for the rest of my life. And it's going to make me only choose healthy things. And then when I started to read it, I was like, oh, I have this completely wrong, and I'm doing myself a lot of damage and potentially other people as well. And so I really started to like heal from the disordered eating. I really started to embody these principles, and then fast forward many months, if not years. And that's the work that I started to bring into my coaching practice. So leaving behind that weight centric, that heavily diet and pure foods motivated way of thinking about health, and really coming back to body image and intuitive eating, which naturally led into, which I know we'll get into, I'm trying not to like say it all right now, but how good girl programming and our drive as women to be compliant, to be agreeable, intersects with this drive that we also have to lose weight and have the perfect body. And that's sort of been my place of passion and what I love to help women with for the past several years.
Wow. What a story. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks for letting me share.
Of course. I have a few questions around that, obviously.
Yes.
The biggest one that I really would love to know is, how did you transition from seeing God or spirituality as this thing that he sees you as bad and wrong, to how you see it now. How did you transition from that to where you are?
Ooh, oh gosh. Okay. So there's many layers to that. And I would say the first, you're a coach, so you know this, that awareness is the first layer of transformation. I had no idea that every action that I was taking, my entire motivation was to prove my goodness, whether that was in the way that I was eating, whether that was how I was showing up in relationships, friendships, whether that was how I was showing up with work, being overly productive, right? Wanting to be seen as like productive and like, I'm like striving, I'm a hard worker. Every aspect of me was motivated by trying to redeem my badness and be seen as good. And if I'm totally honest with you, that was unconscious for me for so long. Like even when I was like kind of healed, not kind of, I had been healed in my relationship to body and food. Like I had no idea that I was still really motivated by that. And it was through like kind of seeing these patterns consistently come up, like, oh, the way I handle my relationship to food is actually how I'm handling this relationship to this friend of mine. And is also how I'm handling my relationship to work. Like I'm always feel like I'm trying to prove something. And it wasn't until that came into my conscious awareness where I was able to say, oh my gosh, wow, this actually stems from this root place inside of me, right? That I've been told I was bad from a very formative age. And so it was getting the clarity and the awareness and finding the origin point of the pattern that allowed that to be possible. And I would say, so Richard Rohr, I can mention him again here. And I don't think this is specifically his language, but it's something that I've learned. There's a process that many of us go through in healing and transformation where it's order, disorder, reorder, right? So we have an orderly way of viewing ourselves, even if it's harmful, right? Even if like if we use relationship to food, for example. So, there's order and there's structure. And it's like, this makes sense to follow this diet, or this makes sense to continuously pursue health through these really disordered ways. Right. And so that feels really orderly. It feels really structured. It gives us control. Right. And then there's the realization, oh, this isn't working. And that's when the disorder happens. Right. This is where the things like break down and you're like, oh my God, I can't actually continue this way, but I don't know what what the other options are, right? But we have to kind of go into the depths. We have to do the healing. We have to look at the patterns. This is where the disorder is happening, and it's incredibly uncomfortable. And then there's eventual reorder, right? Where we come back to a sense of neutral, like I wouldn't even say neutrality. I would say peace, like peace in ourselves, peace in our relationship. If we're talking about food specifically, this is where we would lead to intuitive eating, right? Where we're eating intuitively, where we're honoring our bodies, where it doesn't feel like like the food is controlling us anymore. It feels like we are at cause in our relationship to food. And so I had to go through that in my own spirituality, like what I understood of spirituality, that God is this like angry, punishing God in the sky, this masculine presence that's going to smite me, right? And I had to kind of totally break that down and like go through a grieving process of myself, of like how I'd always known myself to be, is just like, gosh, like a little girl who just believes she's bad. Like when I think about like a 5-year-old, like any other 5-year-old believing that about myself, I'm like, oh no, honey, like you're wonderful. You are good. You are whole just as you are. Right. And so like really speaking to and healing that part of me then is allowing for, and I would say this is an ongoing process. By the way, the order, disorder, reorder is constantly happening, right?
Yeah.
To find my way back to spirituality in a way that actually feels nourishing and soul affirming.
There's so many things I love about what you've shared. One thing that sticks out to me most is you found your way back home. That also kind of goes with the order, disorder, order in the realm of your spirituality. And then also what you noticed about yourself brings to mind a mantra or a statement, if you like, of how you do one thing is how you do everything. So do you notice that with your clients as well, Holly? Like if they come to you with food or body, they're also doing the same thing in their business or their life or their relationships.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I work with my clients. Many of my clients are long-term clients. So we'll start together in the body image work. And I'm sure you can relate to this as well. I often describe body image work as the gateway into our deepest sense of homecoming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because so much of how so much of our true essence is hidden underneath expectation of who we think we should be or who society thinks we should be, right? And that heavily relates, especially as women, to what we look like. And so once we kind of like pull away those layers, and one of my clients calls it peeling back the layers of the parfait. She doesn't like the onion. She's like, peeling back the parfait layers to reveal the truest sense of herself, right? And so body image was her gateway, has been, most of my clients' gateway. And then from there, we continue our work together. And it's different for every single one of them, but it's so fascinating. Like if we decide to work on relationships, it's like, oh yeah, like what parallels do you see? You were navigating your relationship to your body that you see, and how you're navigating your relationship to your partner or your spirituality or motherhood or whatever it might be. And so, yes, I would say we are complex human beings, but we're complex creatures, but we're also really simple too at the same time. And it's like, yeah, we, most of the time, our patterns are like pretty transferable across all areas of our lives.
I've noticed that with myself as well.
Oh,
and then
yes.
I loved what you said about body image is the gateway, because I often like joke with my clients towards the middle to the end of coaching, when at the beginning they've come to me for food problems like disordered eating, can't stop binge eating, emotional eating, all these things. And it's never about the food. The food is a symptom of what's really going on. So then when we probably have 1 to 2 coaching calls where we talk specifically about food. And then all the other calls are nothing to do with food whatsoever. It's about self-love and relationships and body image.
Yeah. 1,000%. That is like almost, I would say with a lot of my clients, what it's always coming back to is a sense of how they will, if they were to heal their relationship to their body and food, which is, again, it's like if they were to be their fullest self, right? If they were to let go of the rules, the restrictions, the expectations, would they still be loved and would they still belong with their people, essentially? And so there's these very tender parts of ourselves that deeply fear our fullness, right? When we are like free from all of that BS, right? That we will lose in some way, that there's some loss that will happen in our relationships. And what I would say, this is something that I learned from one of my teachers. Her name is Madison Morgan, and she's an incredible like mystic coach, just woman. And she always says that what falls away or what crumbles wasn't meant for you to begin with, right? So people who can't hold you in your messy human wholeness, right? People who can't love you regardless of the size of your body or the diet that you're on, or, the perfection that you seem to exude, your intelligence, your whatever it might be, your beauty, if they can't hold you when that changes or that shifts, then that relationship wasn't meant for you to begin with.
Yeah, so powerful. And let's dive into the good girl archetype then, because how does that manifest in the relationship we have with our bodies, with food, in society? Like, let's dive into that, because I think most of my problems have come from that, being the good girl as well.
Oh yes. So I think that there's a quote, speaking of quotes, I almost said this one in the beginning, but I figured that it would be more apropos when we got into this portion of the conversation. Have you read the Beauty Myth by Naomi Wolf?
No, but I've read Beyond Beautiful, which I think is similar, but it's on my wish list on my Audible actually.
I can't recommend it enough. I'm gonna read it because I always have it like available for me for podcast interviews, so I don't butcher it. But the quote goes, "A culture fixated on female thinness is not an obsession about female beauty, but an obsession about female obedience. Dieting is the most potent political sedative in women's history. A quietly mad population is a tractable one."
Cold shiver.
Yes. Every time I read that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I get like the chills up my spine because it's so accurate. And she says specifically it's the most potent political sedative of our time. But I would also add to that, it's the most potent relational sedative. It's the most potent creative sedative. It's the most potent purpose sedative. It's the most potent like feminine sedative, dieting, because of what it does in terms of disconnecting us from our bodies, from our autonomy, from our intuition. And so to me, it's like the biggest issue that impacts women. 91% of women are dissatisfied with their bodies. And when we look at numbers like that, like we have to consider that it's not a matter of nurture, right? Like there has to be something. I'm sorry, it's not a matter of nature. Like we're not born hating our bodies.
No.
Right. And so it must be something systemic that's happening. Right. And that just continuously gets worse. I mean, this generation of young teens with social media, it's like, I do work with teenagers and it's one of my favorite populations to work with, but also the most challenging because of the influence of social media and how image centric, the constant inundating of images in that way. The impact that's having on their self-worth and who they know themselves to be. And so to your question of how does good girl programming intersect with body image, I would say that it's the earliest manifestation of good girl programming because it's something that's so tangible, right? Our bodies are something that we can physically see and touch. It's so easy to project all of our feelings of unworthiness onto the thing that we can see versus actually going into the depths of ourselves to touch those wounds, especially as young children. And so we were conditioned at a very young age to kind of project everything onto our bodies, our worth, our goodness, our value, all of that. And so that's what I always say about where it actually starts is that it's the most tangible thing. It's the most tangible way to understand our goodness is through our bodies.
Yeah. And then we also get praised for it, as you've shared with your story. So it's not even something that you think will make you feel better and then it doesn't. It actually does, because if you've got a hole within you and you're not filling yourself up, you're going to need that external validation to make yourself feel good. So it's like it's its own feedback loop. And it's so hard to get out of that, isn't it?
Oh my gosh. Yes. But it also unfortunately has this like diminishing return effect as everything that's external. Anywhere that I always say this to my clients, anywhere that we attach our worth outside of ourselves is going to have a diminishing return effect. It's like when you so I mentioned before, I'm like a salty, savory person, right? And like when you add too much salt to your food, right? If you're someone who eats a lot of salt, you need to actually continue to add more salt in order to kind of keep enhancing the flavors because you desensitize your tongue in that way, right? And so you think about that with external validation. It's like you get that one compliment and you're like, ooh, that felt so good. And then it feels good for like 10 minutes. And then you're like, okay, I need actually more and I need more and I need more and I need more until it's so like, it's just like this black hole. Like it's never enough. It's never enough validation. It doesn't tell you. I know for me, when I was at my thinnest, I'll never forget. It was right around the time that I found intuitive eating and I weighed myself and I weighed less than I weighed in high school. And I was like, I was in my late 20s at that point. We're not supposed to have the same body that we had when we were in high school, y'all. Like, let's just be real here. And I remember being like, but I still look like this, but my thighs are still like that. Well, I guess I just have more to lose. Right. So there was just like, it was never enough. I couldn't be thin enough. Right. And the same goes for external validation and compliments. It's like, no matter how much we get, when it's something that's external, it's never going to fill us long-term.
Yeah, exactly that. I think I did a podcast one time about people judging us. And one of the questions I asked in there was, how many people would need to say you were enough in order for you to feel enough?
Never enough.
It's never enough. And exactly as you've said, if we place our worth outside, number one, we can't control other people anyway. We actually can't control our bodies. We're just led to believe that we think we can. Going back to Naomi Wolf, is that the author?
Yes.
Going back to what she said, like, can I'm just checking time. I think we've got a little bit of time for you to delve into this a little bit, Holly, because not many women will understand like why diets were even invented, and it was to suppress the feminine.
Yeah. So yeah, if you there's another book that I could recommend that really delves deep into the spiritual origins of dieting. And it's called Fearing the Black Body. So it's a racial justice book on and talking about the roots of fat phobia are racism. But they delve deeply into the spiritual origins of dieting as well, and that many diets were actually created by these like fire and brimstone preachers as a way to get people to stop being like sexual, essentially. Like if they could starve their appetite, they could starve their sexuality and starve pleasure. And if you think about the feminine is about pleasure, right? That's that's what the feminine is about. It's about pleasure, satisfaction, embodied experience. It doesn't, and again, this isn't gender. The feminine is, we all have feminine and masculine energies within us. But yeah, absolutely, to that point, like the root was like, how can we starve this part of a human being, right? So they're no longer connected to it, and they're only in their head, right? They're only using their logic, they're only using brain power, and they're not actually connected to the wisdom, the intelligence, the femininity, the intuition that lives within their bodies.
Wow. So much to explore in the history of dieting. It's not just in the world we live in, smaller equals better. Ultimately, we think we get more love from that, but it's in our genetics, isn't it? It's in our ancestors' history that we carry forth the energy of that, the suppression, the witches being burnt at the stake. You and I would be burnt at the stake right now.
Yeah, definitely. Totally. Many times over. Many times.
It's crazy. So looking at your healing journey, Holly, can you share with us like an embodiment practice or a mindset practice that has really profound? I know there'll be lots of things. It's not just like, oh, just do this one thing and then you're all fine. But what's the most profound things that you've used to help you on your journey?
Okay, I'll give you a mindset one and then an embodiment one, because we're mind and body, right? Like that's and spirit. So and I think this is something that you are probably already aware of and do, but it was the most profound thing for me as well, is the language that we use around our bodies. And we are taught, we didn't really talk about this that much, but like we're taught to see our bodies as a separate object, right? The separate thing that we can control, that we can manipulate, that we can find our value in. And the thing is that we're not objects. We're not fixed objects. We're actually human beings. Your body, if you like stop and think about it for a second, your body is a person, right? Your body is not a machine. And when we refer to our bodies as it, right, this like separate it makes it so much easier for us to project judgment and hate and criticism onto it, right? Because it's like it's not a human, right? It's an it. But when we actually use the pronouns that we identify with, or we identify our body with, to describe our bodies, it humanizes us. And it makes it so much harder to project the criticism onto it. Like it's much harder for me to like look at my body and be like, oh, I hate her. Right. Because that's me hating a human being or wanting to abuse her in some way through dieting. And so being mindful of humanizing language and calling your body she, her, he, him, however you identify, that was by far and away the most profound shift in how I related to my body. And I guess you could say that's also an embodiment practice as well. But I would say in terms of embodiment practices, this is something that I would say working with a coach or a therapist or a healer, somebody who can hold space for you to be with your body is going to be really important, because we've been disconnected from them for so long that it can feel really overwhelming to kind of come back into relationship with your body and live through and in your body. And so I'll just name that first and foremost. Like if embodiment practice is something that feels really like confronting to you, like because you're so used to being in your head, or there's trauma or whatever it might be, then I totally understand and get support, right? For someone who can like hold space for you in that. But I would say that the simple act of using movement and dance specifically, like I'm big into dance, to reconnect with my body intuitively has been the most healing. And dancing for me is incredibly joyful. So it allows me to experience joy in my body while I'm doing something that reconnects me to her. So I have a playlist which I can send to you too. It's called the Return to Wholeness playlist, and it mirrors back my podcast, Return to Wholeness. And it's a playlist that I'm listening to constantly and dancing to.
Oh, I would love that. I dance
Yeah.
every morning. I choose one song after my workout, and depending on the mood, it might be a sad one, a happy one, like a dancey one. And I go upstairs where my gym is. There's no mirrors, and I just close my eyes and just move my body. So anyone listening, definitely try this. But if you can, have somewhere where you can't see yourself. That helped me at the beginning, because otherwise we're so used to objectifying our bodies. We think we look stupid or we don't look great or whatever. Just be in your body. And the more you keep practicing those little things, just gets a little bit easier each time, doesn't it? And then you'll notice during a lovemaking intimacy session, you can feel what's going on more, other than thinking, have I got a role in this position, or what does my bum look like from that? Like, I used to be in my head so much.
Mm-hmm.
I even was surprised I could actually orgasm, to be honest.
Yes. Yes. I totally resonate with that.
Yeah. And the next thing I wanted to ask you, because it's something that I'm still working on actually, so maybe you could help me out as well. How do we start to speak our truth, to say no to others, to say yes to ourselves, when we feel guilt after choosing us? How do we go through that? The disease to please is real.
Disease to please. I love that. Oh gosh, we all we all have that disease to please. I mean, not all of us, but many of us do. I would say the first and foremost, so many of us as women, we learn about this new idea. Like, okay, I'm supposed to say no, and I'm supposed to set boundaries. And then we expect ourselves to get it right away. Right? We expect ourselves to be like perfect at it right away. Like, I'm an empowered woman and I know how to set boundaries. And then it becomes too much for us, right? We try to like set all of these boundaries, and then we get negative feedback, or somebody doesn't uphold them, or we get something happens where it causes us to retract, right? And so we push ourselves too hard initially to like get it perfect. That, as you know, as a coach, right? Like, it's small, manageable steps over time that actually allow us to make transformation in our lives. And so I would say first and foremost, like, scale back, right? If there's a person in your life that you need to set boundaries with, like if it's someone you have a really complicated relationship with, like starting with that person might be really challenging, right? It might feel really hard. But if you start with a relationship that you trust, let's say like a close friend. You know what? I'm going to use this example because I find this to be really helpful. It's not necessarily about saying no, but it's about having an unpopular opinion and being terrified to share it. So I have many dissenting opinions. I have many opinions that fall outside of the mainstream of what's expected of me to think. And I would like in working with my coach, I would like beg her, can you just make me think like everyone else? Because it feels so uncomfortable for me to be talking to this group of friends and all of them think this, but I think this, right? And it's like, it feels so uncomfortable. It feels so like, I feel like I'm bad, right? Because they all agree. And so I'm the different one. So that means I'm bad, right? And so the work wasn't about changing my mind and my opinion. The work was about finding the goodness within myself and then being able to share that authentically. And at first I expected myself to just like, again, decide overnight, I'm good. And therefore I can share my opinions out loud and proud online and everyone will like accept me for it. Or even if they don't, like, I'll still be okay no matter what. And the truth is that didn't happen, right? Like the truth is that I resisted sharing online because that wasn't the right space for me. But what did really work for me was to find one friend that I trust, that even if she doesn't agree with what I have to say, I knew she would love me. And I knew she would say to me, I hear you no matter what. And I shared with her some controversial things that I had written. And she was just like, I love you. And that was it. And so finding that one trustworthy person to kind of practice with would be, to me, the place to start. Like if it's a partner where you can practice just saying no to that person, right? If it's a close friend where you can practice sharing an unpopular opinion. Start small and then invite, like slowly but surely you'll build the muscle of like, I guess you could call it confidence. I don't know if it's I would say that it's more just like groundedness in yourself to be able to know that you are okay to be different. You are okay to say no. It is okay to actually disappoint people, and that you can leave them to their experience. Like they are an adult who can handle their disappointment. Right? If you say no to them, they are grown ass people who can say no, who can hear no, right? They're not children. They're not toddlers who are going to throw a tantrum. They can hear that and deal with their own feelings. You're responsible for yourself. Does that make sense what I'm saying? I know it's kind of a way of explaining it.
It makes total sense. And it's very, very powerful, because that's, as you said, standing in your own truth, sharing your voice and opinion, but being okay with disappointing other people, because everyone's going to have a different opinion about different things. And if we try to please them, we'll be displeasing someone else, we'll be displeasing ourselves. And you can never, ever, ever win. There is a majority. And I think I know what you're talking about. And I also feel the same as you. There's definitely a difference in opinion. And it can seem like the masses look at you thinking, no, you're the crazy one. And that's okay. But it's so interesting that your vision of having everyone just loving each other as one, without them having to be having the same opinion or agreeing, because we can honor each other, but standing in your power and sharing your truth, that's also creates change, because someone might also think, oh, wow, that's a really interesting perspective. Let me explore that. And I think if we don't do that, it's a detriment not only to ourselves, but to other people as well.
1000%. And I would say to that, there's a book I feel like I've mentioned so many books. There's a book by a man named Peter Boghossian called How to Have Impossible Conversations. And you'll see so much these days of people just like debating facts, right? Like, but this is what my science says, right? This is what the right science says. And then the other person on the other side, but this is what my science says, right? And so like, there's like debating that's happening. And there's no real connection in that, because you're just sharing, I think what he calls of like your library of stolen information, right? Because you're just using other people's facts to try to change another person. And that actually isn't what creates connection. That's not actually what creates change, if that's something that you're wanting to do, or even just the opening up of different perspectives, right? What actually opens up a human being is when somebody feels like they're being seen with curiosity, right? Where there's not assumptions being made about them, where they're not being put into this category of like moral, immoral, right? And you're just, oh, that's so interesting that you think that. It's so interesting that that's your perspective. I'm wondering, where did you hear that? Tell me more about how you came to that conclusion, right? More curiosity about that person versus just like, oh, this person didn't do this thing, so they have to be put into this category, right? And they get all of the stigma associated with that. And then on top of that, I think it's so important for us, and this is something that I have to do too, is to have the humility to know that we actually don't have all the answers, right? Like we can inform ourselves to the best of our abilities and read conflicting information and take in lots of different ideas, but also just assuming that we don't know everything and having the humility to be like, hey, this is what I think right now, but I'm really open, right? Like I'm really like, I'm not going to be arrogant enough to think that I have it all figured out, or that anybody has it all figured out. It's just like a much more curious and humble way to approach connection and disagreement, and hopefully create maybe not change, but at least mutual understanding and respect.
Yeah, I agree. I so much agree. And also honoring yourself in regards to this feels right for me. Even if I have facts, you have facts, I respect that feels right for you. This is what feels right for me. And we're all on our own soul's path in this lifetime. So it's just honoring ourselves first and then honoring others as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's it.
So Holly, how do you work with clients, and how can they find you? What offers do you have on? Tell us the juice.
Yeah. So I'm actually, I'm not sure when this is coming out, but I'm at a place right now, and more will be revealed towards the end of January, where I'm sort of on pause with putting any new things out into the world, until probably about summer-ish, like July-ish. So there's really not many ways to work with me currently. But I love interacting with people online. So I have a complicated relationship with Instagram, but you can find me on Instagram at just holly.toronto. My podcast is Return to Wholeness, so that you can, listen weekly. I have awesome episodes. One's going to be coming out with Victoria in early February. You can download my Return to Wholeness playlist, and get on my email list to know about things that are kind of coming up. But yeah, that would probably be the ways to kind of interact with me at this point.
Yay. And I recommend 1000% Holly's podcast. Like, there's this one episode that I've listened to about 4 times, and I've like sent it in all my group programs. Like, listen, it's the body image one.
Which one? Oh my gosh, which one? Do you know which one it was called? I'm so curious.
You was talking by yourself, and it was an hour and a half long.
Oh, is it the body image and compliant woman one?
I think it was exactly that one.
Yes.
So many nuggets in there. So I'm going to link that episode as well below, because I think everyone, I asked you the question about what book should everyone read. Yes. Every woman should listen to this episode. For sure. You're amazing, Holly. Thank you for your time and wisdom.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And I cannot wait to get this out.
Yay. Thank you.
Much love, everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Bye.